Welcome to Mentor. I'm Rachel Ford.
And I'm Marco Bertozzi.
And coming up today, we've got an interesting guest, haven't we?
Great guest.
Claudine.
Great guest.
Claudine Collins. She is one of the interviewers in The Apprentice, and she's been doing it nearly 12 years now. So I
can't believe how time has flown.
I know, time has flown. I'm like, I'm not sure I want to be in an interview with Claudine Collins, but she gives some great tips, actually, doesn't she, about what's her number one tip for interview success. So
if you want to know her number one tip, listen in.
Yeah.
We grilled her very hard on it, and so if you want to find out who won The Apprentice,
not really. Don't worry, Lord Sugar. She doesn't. She doesn't say. She didn't give it away. She did not give it away. But actually, I think what's really lasting for me, and I think anybody that knows Claude knows that actually it's the importance and time and effort that she's put into her relationships over the years, whether that's been with her clients, with media partners, with her colleagues. And I think it really is interesting to hear how that's really set her up for success in her whole career, understanding the importance of really fostering.
It's great advice for anyone, really. With client relationships, everyone's got a client of some sort.
Exactly.
So,
listen to that.
And here we are this week.
Yeah.
It's all about advertising Europe.
At the time of recording, who knows when this is going to go out, but at the time of recording. It is Advertising Week Europe here in London at 180 Studios. And so we were down there this morning, we were bright and early for the Pinterest Positivity Breakfast.
Yes,
this morning. It's all about positivity. Apparently, Pinterest is the number one social channel for, mood board. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I'm going to put positive mood boards on there. Actually, you're Pinterest, and you must be all over Pinterest right now.
Well, I, as you know, 8-9 months into a house renovation, and Pinterest has been, 100%. This show is not sponsored by Pinterest, by the way.
But we do like Pinterest. But actually,
we do like Pinterest.
But what was but they had a chat this morning with the country manager and Dan Finley, who's CEO of Debenhams, and actually one of the things he said was that, and I was looking at you in the audience, Marco, when he said, when you're going to do a house renovation and you say it's going to take you 12 to 18 months, it's going to take you 5 years. Oh no, Marco. Don't let that get you down.
Subject.
Don't let that get you down. But actually his we go to these things to be part of the industry, and we can talk a bit about what we saw there this morning. But what sat with me was when Dan Finley was talking about, if you say you're going to, he also said, if you're going to say you're going to paint your living room by Christmas, you probably start to paint it in December, because we kind of leave things to the end. And he was saying that from his point of view, the way that he gets things done in his business is that when he focuses on the future, he focuses on what we're going to do today, what we're going to do tomorrow, and his future is, and what we're going to do the day after. Yeah. And I do like that real, I suppose, accountability to action, because we can procrastinate quite a lot, can't we? Whereas if we kind of do what's in front of us, we've heard that as well on this podcast.
We have heard that a lot, haven't we? Yeah. I think, we've heard it as a managing technique for, dealing with when you've got too much on. And I think he was coming at it very much from the, let's not talk about things that are in the second half or next year, or let's, I don't know how, in reality, what that really looks like. There's a bit of me, if he's the client, there's a bit of me that's thinking, well, that means the agency's getting last minute briefs, whatever. But I don't know. But anyway, it seemed very positive. I think the thing for me was, this is, first of all, I didn't know Debenhams had been going 247 years. And what did he say? It was 10 years before the first US president or something nuts like that. But anyway, so, quite interesting to hear about how it started, which was, he was the first, I think it was William Debenhams was the first person to put two brands under one roof to start the department store, the concept of the department store. And he said also to start the concept of the high street in that sense. And it was, so he's taken what was a brand that had gone into administration. He's taken it 100% online, and he's obviously now innovating with it, and he wants it to become this Uber sort of online high street, I guess, if you want to call it, or marketplace. And I love all of that, and well done to him and well done to them for keeping a brand alive. I guess I kind of also sat there thinking about, the reality of our high streets, though, and how under-invested and how little innovation is going into the high street. And, I was thinking, imagine if we could, if people like him and others could turn their attention to regenerating high streets. That would be a positive. That would be a positive for most
giving it a go. How many years do you say they've been going on the high street? I think it's...
Well, yeah, no. I mean, you've got to change.
Isn't it? As much as anything. But no, I think it's... No, we really like... It's an amazing event on... I don't know how many floors there are down at 180 The Strand, and Ruth Mortimer that leads it, and Katie Ingram. They've... just how they've pulled this whole... whole content. Like, there's just so much content there. And we're really lucky because we are... part of their speed mentoring.
We're mentoring.
We are mentoring. So
that's worked out.
So that actually,
we're living the, what is it? Living the talk or whatever.
We're walking the talk, not just talking the talk. So we'll be speed mentoring to tomorrow, and actually I've already judged Future Female Awards. So the awards ceremony is tonight, and my God, I mean, we interview some amazing guests on here, and then when you read what some of these women are doing, it's like, I mean, I feel incredibly inadequate. But we'll be going down there after today, won't we? But yes, I think that's what's going on in Adlan right now, isn't it? So I think we should open the door to let Claude in. Should we let Claude in?
Come on in, Claude. Our guest today is one of the industry's most respected leaders. Claudine Collins is Chief Client Officer at EssenceMediacom UK with over 30 years experience. She's renowned for her client leadership, mentoring work and role as final interviewer on BBC's The Apprentice. Claudine champions resilience, relationships and authentic leadership. Welcome, Claude.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for making the time. I know you're in the throes of The Apprentice, so holding down your job and being TV celebrity and still making time for us. So we're very grateful for that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, and is it? I think you were on The Apprentice. You're fired just recently.
I was.
Yeah, and do you get spotted in the street?
Well, the funny thing is, I do sometimes get spotted. People do stop me, or they do say, oh, "I really recognise you," and it might be, "Do you work at my son's school?" I'm like, no. So I forget, because it happens during a pretty small period of time, and you realise you film kind of in the summer. The show goes out March, like my episode goes out in March, then You're Fired is also in March. So around that time you get like noticed, and some people ask for selfies, which I think is just so funny because it's...
I bet your stepdaughters love that, don't they, though?
They do love it.
They've got a celebrity.
Yeah, they do love it.
And because you've been doing it, nearly 12 years?
Yeah, 12 years, yeah.
Wow.
I had 1 year off a couple of years ago. But then 12 years, and he's just signed up for another 3 years.
I was going to say, are you going to do so?
I don't know.
Signed up for 3 years.
No, I haven't. And the problem is it's always over my birthday when it's filmed, and it's a lot of work. I think people think that I get given the questions, or we're only interviewing for 10 minutes because you literally see snippets, but there are 5 interviews, and each interview is an hour long, and I have to go through the business plans, the CVs, the application forms, and I have to write my own questions. So it's a lot of time, and also that also coincides with Cannes Week. So June is really busy. Oh
God, it's a write-off.
It is, and my birthday in the middle, so I never really get to celebrate that. So we'll see. We'll see. I take it year by year.
Year by year. We'll say, Sir Alan, you'll have to wait to see whether Claude is going to sign up for another.
Sugar now, Lord Sugar.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Lord Sugar.
Yes,
Lord Sugar. And we touched on actually just in the opening that you've just passed a significant milestone, celebrating 30 years, but at the same company. So EssenceMediacom, a big agency powerhouse globally.
Yeah.
I mean, and we'll come back to why you stayed so long, because obviously it's
Yeah.
obviously a special place for you. But just before we go into that, and so for the listeners, if you could just give a brief overview of your 30 years at EssenceMediacom, just to give a flavour, and if you can try and fit us 30 years in
60
years in 60 seconds.
Give
I mean,
or
it's a
take.
challenge, but give or take, it'd be just great to hear.
Actually, it's in the industry longer than 30 years. So although everyone thinks, and I'm glad that I've only been there, I actually was at 2 other agencies before that. I was at Squires Robertson Gill as media independent, and then I went to what is now Wavemaker, but was CIA at the time, where I first worked with Karen Blackett and some of the other people still in the industry. And then I moved to what was the media business before it got bought out by Mediacom and then EssenceMediacom. So
Did you go with Claude? Sorry, did you go with Karen then? Did you go?
I actually poached Karen.
Did
so
you?
Karen went from CIA to Zenith.
Gosh,
and-
I never remember.
Yeah, she was only at Zenith for 3 months before I messaged her and said, because we both left at exactly the same time. And I said,
Right.
how's your job going? She was like, it's hideous. How's yours? I said, I love it. There's a job here. There's a vacancy here. Do you want me to put your name forward?
Wow.
So I put her name forward. And I remember the person that employed her was Steve Goodman. And he said, if she's rubbish, I'm going to blame you.
Oh.
So when she got made CEO and got her OBE, I sent him a note and say, do you want to remember that conversation he had? He said, I take all credit for it. So anyway, it was me. It was me. Same way that I employed Francis Ralston Good and Mediacom
all
as well.
the goodies.
But my 30 in what is it? 30
Yeah, 30.
years in 60 seconds. So I went into advertising by chance, which lots of people do, by looking at the careers library, starting at A, and the first thing was advertising. I thought that'll do. Started at Media Independent, buying press, just buying press. Loved it, absolutely loved it. Spent a few years there, went to CIA doing press as well and direct response, and then moved to the media business, which is now EssenceMediacom, if you like. There were 50 people there, including Nick Lawson, Sue Uniman, Mark Collins, no longer at the company just yet. And I went from being a press buyer to head of investment to then becoming the managing director. And then I wanted a bit of a change because the managing director role became much more about codes and kind of bureaucratic stuff. And I loved
Operational.
Yes, much more operational. And I loved working with clients. I just loved working with clients. I just wanted to make sure the clients were happy. So I moved to be Chief Client Officer, where I still am.
Yeah. And I think that is your whole thing. It's that passion. And I don't think there's any client that doesn't feel incredibly looked after by you. I know when Natalie joined the company, Natalie Cummings, she just said, I don't think there's anybody that understands and works with clients better than Claude.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah. And
That is so lovely.
yeah.
It's the secret of good client relationships, you think?
I think I really care about our clients and about their business. And I said this to someone yesterday. I said, I really care as much about a really small piece of business as I do a massive piece of business. I care as much about, I don't know, a finance brand as I do about Cartier, right? So I love it, and I get to know people, and I genuinely like people. So I'm interested in them, and I make time for them. And if my clients ever need me, you know, I'm sure we'll come on to this afterwards, but, you know, as far as I'm concerned, they can ring me at 10 o'clock at night if they've got a problem and I really wouldn't have an issue. They don't, but they could. And I think they know that. I think they absolutely know that if they need anything, I will go as far as I can to sort things out for them.
And I think we've heard that actually that quite a lot through this podcast, that it's just understanding people as human beings.
Yeah.
And having that, I suppose, that empathy for the situation, because I think probably one of the hardest roles in marketing right now is a CMO role.
Yeah,
they've got so multifaceted. They've got to have capabilities across everything, and it can be a lonely place at the top. So to know that you've got agency partners who not only understand their business but understand them as an individual, I think that's what makes the difference between a good partner and a brilliant partner, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's always struck me that whenever business used to go up for pitch, a lot of the times when you sort of dug into the feedback, clients would say, "Oh, I've sort of been left.
Yeah.
I haven't
Yeah.
had the client service that
Yeah.
I did at the start,
Yeah.
or I haven't heard from the agency for a
Yeah.
while, or I haven't heard from." And so on one level, it's really simple. Like, it looks simple. Is like, look after your clients.
Yeah.
And you're clearly not going to avoid all pitches, but you're going to be in a better place. But so often that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And
I completely agree. And I think there are so many simple things you can do. I met a client recently who we were chatting, and I said to him, "I hear your nickname's Two Donut David." And he burst out laughing and he said, "Who told you that?" I said, "I'm not telling you." He said, "Well, you know why that is?" I said, "Well, I'm assuming." He goes, "Yeah, I can never eat one donut. I have to have two donuts." The next day I sent him a box of donuts, right? It is just not rocket science to make people feel special.
Yeah.
I write down when my clients' birthdays are, I kind of like congratulate them when they've been up for an award or stuff like that. It's just keeping in touch. And I always say to people, I know there is a lot to do and everyone is really busy, but it just takes seconds to drop a line to somebody. And I don't mean just clients, it's media partners, it's people internally. "Hey, how are you? Haven't spoken to you for a while." And the top thing I'm going to do when I go back after this is, because I've been off for a few weeks recuperating, my first thing is I've got a list of clients that I'm going to just message and say, "Hey, I'm back."
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
You must have been, I mean, some of these are very, they're tenets that apply to everything, but I can imagine, have you ever been tempted to go to the sales side? Because I think you'd be a very good sales. You must have flirted with it on occasion.
I've definitely been tempted to go to the sales side. I haven't really to the client side, to be honest, but the sales side I've thought of. But it, for one reason or another, it just hasn't happened. And as as I'm sure we'll come in onto, honestly, the reason that I've stayed 30 years is because every time that I feel that I've done the role that I've done and I can't really do it any better, I will have the conversation with whoever my boss is and they will find me something else, or we will work on a different role together.
So you've always felt that there's a new challenge, there's a new motivation.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the whole thing of, I mean, I stayed at Publicis 20 years, and I think when I left, it was a bit like it was a now or never. If I didn't leave after 20 years, I knew I'd be there for another 30. Because actually, if it was like some of my best years of my life, and I was always doing something different, there was always a new challenge. So I never felt stuck in a rut. And I think whether you're somewhere 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years, I think it is making sure that you are keeping things fresh for you and fresh for the company. And I think, but you need the right bosses to have those conversations with, don't you?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, you need the right boss. You need the right. I left Publicis to go to Spotify because there were lots of those opportunities. I mean, I was there 18 years as well. Yeah. But then it stopped being that, and it became a sort of, when you see the Greek gods up in the clouds and they're just moving the pieces.
Yeah.
I felt like one of those pieces where suddenly I wasn't having those conversations. It's more like, now you're going to do this.
Yeah.
Now, and I was a bit like, no, I don't want to do, that's not how I want it. So those bosses are very important.
Absolutely.
In terms of how they treat you and so on.
Absolutely.
So we will definitely come back to some of those things. And, but you've been a big advocate for mentorship, obviously. Podcast is Mentor, and particularly for women. Like, how do you think about mentorship for your own, the last 30 years for you, and advice you give to others that are maybe thinking, have they got mentors, and how to find mentors?
Yeah. So I think, honestly, the last few years has been quite difficult because obviously COVID was difficult. It was a really different time. And also I have learned, partly through my stepchildren as well, that that generation view things very differently to how I viewed things when I was younger, maybe even still do view things. So I have to change my mindset quite a lot. But mentorship to me has been really invaluable, and I am so lucky that I had so many people that were, as Karen would say, cheerleaders, from Stephen Allen to Nick Lawson to Karen to Kate Roylandson and Satin, Natalie, and it's we talk about things and we're really open about things, and they have given me some great advice, because no one knows everything. So there are times at the moment and the last few years where I'm balancing having older parents that are not well, trying to hold down a really full-on job, and stepchildren, trying to balance all of those. And I think you get to a certain age when you do have older parents and you have to take that into account, and that's tough. So they people that have been through it before have helped me with it, and I think it's really tough for younger people now. I really do, in so many ways, like financially, work-wise. When I look back on my life, and I think to myself, there probably are things that I should have done differently, maybe would have done differently. Don't want people to make the same mistakes, as in working too hard and not prioritizing family or finding a partner. You're just working too hard to actually be too tired. I see it with people. They're too tired to go out in the evenings because they've been working so hard. And I would always say, no, you do not want to work your whole life and then die. That that's kind of partly my fear. So people at work, especially younger women at work, I often have a coffee, just a chat and a coffee. It's not a regular, regimented once a month. We're going to sit down and talk about things. And if you do that, you need to have an aim and an end goal of what they want out of it. But today I already had like 3 messages from 3 of the younger women that work in the agency. Are you back today? And I was like, yeah. Oh, can we get together? And I know as soon as I walk in, I'll get a massive hug from all of them. So it's kind of being there, and helping them as much as you can.
I think it's a great way of staying. I mean, it's also a nice way of hearing from them as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Naturally, through that process of you helping them, you're also hearing
but the reverse,
motivating them.
And also there's a bit of reverse mentoring as well, because I think, look, we can all still learn, can't we? And I think being open to things can change, or actually open from different viewpoints. I think actually that benefit of, just as you say, having a coffee with no agenda, who knows what's going to come out of that, or they might have an idea about a new client event they can do, or you've kind of that connection and being in touch. But you touched on it then in terms of like what advice, like would you go back to your younger self and give you some different advice, do you think, to how you've had your career?
It's a really hard thing to think about that, because obviously I think, like, so many people say, oh, I don't have any regrets, right? And when I look at my life, I think, my goodness, I am so lucky. I've had such an incredible career. I've had so much fun in that time. I mean,
we've had a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I mean, we really have.
No, we're really privileged.
If you work in a bank, would you have had that? Honestly, I think working mothers are unbelievable. I don't know how they do it. So had I have had kids, would I have had all that fun? And would I have, it's a hard thing to go back on. But the one thing that I would say was I should have had a better balance between not just work and work social events. And, I'm lucky. All my best friends I've known since I was 17. And while they were going through babies, I was out partying at work dues, or, out with clients or whatever it might be. And we've all stayed like incredibly close. But, as is quite common, I didn't get married till common knowledge. I mean, I didn't get married till quite late, very late, actually. Didn't have like my own children. Do I regret that? I don't know about the marriage bit, but definitely not having my own children is something that I would have loved to have had. And can I look back on it and think it's my own fault because I worked too hard and didn't make time for that? Maybe. So younger people that talk to me about that, I always say to them, please make time. If you don't want want to have children or don't want to meet anyone, absolutely, but don't look back and think it was because I was working too hard.
And I think we've heard this as well, though, on this podcast. I think the ethic that we all grew up with, though, was if you want to get anywhere, you work hard.
Yeah.
And it was just, that was the message, work hard.
Yeah.
And so what you were doing was you were working as like being everything to your job.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's,
You're not the first guest who said that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just think it was the ethic. Even if you think back to Wackle, like that was all about women that were working hard, and very few of them had children. Because actually, if you look back at some of the older members of Wackle, they didn't actually have family because it just wasn't. Because if you were a successful woman, you didn't.
Absolutely
And I think there's a lot about how we were all brought up in terms of you work hard.
Yeah.
And so that was what you did.
Yeah. I do really believe that if I had children, I wouldn't be where I was now, because so much of my role in my 30s was evening events with clients, and that is how you get to kind of know them. Even now, I have dinners with my clients more than actually I do lunches, because they tend to cancel them because obviously they're working really hard during the day and they can relax more when you go out in the evening. So I have probably a couple of dinners a week with my clients, and I don't know how I'd have been able to do that if I'd had young children. I probably wouldn't have been able to do it. And then I wouldn't have probably, I can't say for definite, had the career that I had.
I mean, we're at an interesting point, I think, because you rewind a year or so, and we were still very work from home, mixture, but more work from home than not. And I would have said then that, if you think about not only working hard, but regardless of whether so many people met partners at work, right?
Yeah, true.
And, so all of that, and building relationships with clients and internally and so on. And, we're just on that cusp of like people sort of being asked to come back and live a little bit of that life again. But certainly my experience of working with some of the younger, they've sort of gone completely the other way now, where they're like, I go to work, I make money, and that pays for my life outside of work. Yeah. And obviously there are exceptions. Yeah. But there's more of that attitude. There's more of that, I work to live. Yeah. That's the right way around, isn't it? And but when you think about that, like where would you stand on all of that now? Sort of, because I feel like it's difficult to have the conversation because we are all of that generation. Yeah. Like we haven't got a 25-year-old here putting us straight. But I feel like, God Almighty, they're missing out on. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, I agree. But I think things have changed. So I think that even when we were younger and media owners would put on drinks in a bar for everyone, everyone would go. It would be heaving. It would be like a free party, if you like. Number one,
a lot less drinking, isn't it?
A lot less drinking. Yeah. People want to go home. I understand that, and so when I remember a couple of years ago after COVID, and one of the media owners wanted to put on drinks, and everyone was going to me, we can't get anyone to go. They just want to go home. I think the working from home. So I personally much prefer being in the office. However, I do like to have a day or so at home a week. I really do. Yeah. I think, honestly, Mark Reed is right in that our work wasn't as good when we weren't together. And I know that when I learnt from sitting next to people that were more senior than me, and I'd hear them on the phone to clients or to partners, media partners, and I'd learn in how they spoke to them, and I'd just pass something to them and go, oh, can you help me with this? Yeah. I wouldn't make a Teams call to ask someone, can you help me just with this thing? And so I definitely think more in the office than at home is the way to go. But you're right. When we were younger, we would save our money to buy a property. Now, it's almost impossible for young
Not
people
bothered.
to buy a property and save that money. So I think they think to themselves, and I don't really blame them, if you're just working to pay your bills, right? That's quite a miserable existence. So you have to have something else, and you do have to have things outside of work. But work, is a social, fun place. We're in a fabulous industry that is like that. It's really not.
So the question is, will people, because we're Rachel and I are both fans of Pivot with Scott Galloway, and he will always say, and he's obviously, very opinionated, but he will always say, if you want to get on at work, get in the office, go and meet people. Do you think there is a risk that the people who, are doing less of that are going to fall behind those that are going back in?
Yeah, I do. Honestly, in honesty,
Well,
I
if
do.
the learning, like as you say, just from the learning side, from the visibility, because we always say, especially when you're younger, say yes to as many things as you can. Just put your hand up, get in there, speak to different people. Even if it's speaking to somebody making a cup of coffee or whatever, it's actually just be amongst it, isn't it? So I think
Put your hand up.
There's a feeling of, being at the centre of things. You're going to get more opportunity.
Yeah.
And as you say, that learning bit, and I suppose then to go back to your bit, we just feel that on a social level, you're just missing out on a deeper relationship with your colleagues.
Yeah.
And actually, I suppose we felt like it was, who's got it wrong? Like, it was like our work family. So you would hang out with them like your family. Whereas I suppose, is it younger people today saying, well, I'm not going to give everything. We kind of gave everything to our jobs where you're not paying me enough to do whatever. So I'm going to hold a bit of me back. And I think there's that separation where, as we say, who's got it wrong or right? It's just a different way of operating.
That's right.
Our advice would still be, but just, get as involved as many things as you can, because it opens doors and serendipity. But coming back to The Apprentice, I'm sure, as you say, people recognise you. When you get into that interview room, I'm sure, there's kind of like the Apprentice interviews, and obviously we'll come back to the real life. I can't imagine anybody ever being interviewed in real life by Claudine Collins. They must be absolutely terrified. Yeah. But obviously, you as you said, you did a lot of the research yourself. You have to go through everything. You go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. The devil is in the detail.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? But I suppose from that, are there key traits that might even be the way somebody walks in the room? Are there key traits that you immediately recognised as being, they've got leadership potential?
Yes, and the opposite. So you're right. I remember one of the candidates just sitting there slouching, looking out the window, and I said, sit up, and he was like, like this. I was like, okay, you're not
and
being
got
serious.
Through the process, far through the process at this time. Like, they are literally, they've got an opportunity right in front of them.
So there are 4 of us that do it, and each of us have our kind of specialism, if you like. Mine is to look at the person, know if they have got that leadership skill, know if they will work well with Lord Sugar, know if people that work for them would respect them. And so there are lots of telltales. There have been people that have walked in that when you have a conversation with them, they're just in it because they want the fame. There are people that walk in that I think one of the biggest things is accepting responsibility for the mistakes you've made along the way and saying, I messed that up. But you know what? I really learned from that and I would never do it again, as opposed to people that come in that will absolutely think the right thing to do is stand by what they did. And you go, how can you still say that knowing what happened? Yeah, no, I would do it exactly the same way again. And you think, well, then you haven't really learned.
No, you've not learned.
So it is interesting.
But how much when you think about those situations, what are there parallels with the real world?
I think in the real world, I remember once interviewing for a business director, client lead, and the person that worked for me was like, you've got to meet this person, they're brilliant. I walked into the room and I came out and I said, nope. And they went, why? I said, no, they may have the technical skills, but they're not a team player. they would not be right. Relationships wise, they don't have the same values that we have. I said, you can always teach skills. You cannot teach behaviours or values. And then I remember walking into a room and literally as I walked in, this young woman stood up, big smile on her face, shook my hand. And before she'd even opened her mouth, I thought, she's the one.
Yeah.
And she was.
Yeah.
And, I do pride myself that my employment record has been really very good. So,
Right.
Dan Wood, Sonia Arthur, Catherine Prinzato, Francis, I employed all of them.
Yeah. And I think that first, I was doing a school talk the other day, and I can't remember what the question was, but it was about, we haven't talked about interviews much, so this is good.
Actually, yeah, really.
And I said to them, I'm sorry, but you need to know that that first few seconds could be your make or break. When we were talking about preparing for interviews, obviously they're more junior and whatever, but I'm like, a lot of people make their mind up really quickly. So
it is subliminal, isn't it? As well.
Yeah.
Try to not have an unconscious, and sometimes you do. But it is, what is it? You never get a second chance to make a first impression.
No.
That's
very
amazing.
true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Rachel loves
I love
a
one-liner.
Oh my God. We heard one today, and I thought, I was just sitting there, I was thinking, Rachel's going to love that. First thing she said to me when she came out.
Okay, CEO,
what was it?
CEO of Debenhams,
stood
stood there, and he said, look, especially how they've had a real transformation from the high street into digital. He said, look, of course we look to the future. When I think about the future, he says, tell me what you're going to do today, tell me what you're going to do tomorrow, and tell me what you're going to do the day after. It's like, really focus on what are we going to do now. And I thought, actually, that is a really good thing.
Yeah, he was right, because he said, look, if you say I'm going to paint the front room by Christmas, you'll probably be doing it in December.
That's right.
Which is fair. We all do that.
Yeah.
So his point was to sort of, keep it front and centre.
In front of you.
So we love the biggest fuck up question. So we're gonna aim it at you.
And you're obviously going to own. We learn from our mistakes. Some of them can be humongous.
Absolutely. I will tell you. This came up in my 30th anniversary drinks when Nick Lawson made a speech, and he said to me, do you mind me telling the story? And I said, no, I don't mind at all. I've been through it. So about 15 years ago, there was, if you remember, I'm sure you will remember, a section in Media Week, which was My Media Week, right? And you would detail what you had done in that week. And at the time, I was the group press director, I think of Mediacom. And I was being wined and dined when the days when you could be by all and everyone.
Yeah.
And I was really honest about my week. So I was like, get up at 5 a.m. for my personal training session with Barry, who put me through my paces. 7:30 power juice, 8 o'clock breakfast with the CEO of the Telegraph, Murdoch McLennan. It kind of went, it literally was a week of who's who and food and restaurants.
Actually, all true though.
All true. All true, right? And I remember when it appeared online, the trolling that I got at the bottom with someone going, oh my God, I met Jane from accounts in M&S buying a prawn sandwich. And I'm like, I don't think this has gone down very well.
This is pre-social media, right? So it would have been in the comments,
it was
basically.
Pre-social media,
website.
thank God, although it's still out, I'm sure. Yes, but in the comments. And I just remember putting my hands in my head. And at the time, the managing director of Mediacom, who isn't there anymore, came in to see me, and he said to me, he started laughing and he went, you need to keep your head down, Claude. You need to keep your head down. And I said, well, I'm supposed to be going out with the editor of GQ for lunch today. And he went, cancel it. So I remember sitting at my desk, like with my head in my hands, and Nick Lawson walked in. And he was laughing and he went, oh, Claude. And I said, what? He goes, you're so naive. He said, but you're so honest. He goes, because that was true. I said, maybe not the 5:30 every day getting up for Barry, the personal trainer, but yes, it was. And he said, and I said, but the MD has told me that I have to keep my head down. And he said, absolutely not. He said, the reason we love you is that you know all these people, you get things done for our clients, you go out there with your head held high.
Exactly.
But meanwhile, I mean, I did get ribbed about it for a long time, and I got grief over it. And the worst thing about it, actually, was that I really retreated into myself.
Oh.
So I felt like I didn't want to put my head above the parapet, and I didn't want to go out that much because I didn't want people to look at me. And funny enough, the person that stuck up for me, the first person to write something under all those comments, was Mark Mendoza, who was at Havas, so a completely rival agency, that said, it wouldn't be a very interesting article, would it, if it was about just sitting there doing spreadsheets and going out for an M&S sandwich with Jane from accounts. Yeah. The person that I fear most coming up on a pitch with is Claudine, because of her relationships and because she knows everybody and gets stuff done for her clients. And I forever have loved him for that.
Well, those just a sort of powerful comment like that in the sea of negativity.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, aren't they all jealous? Didn't they all want to be having lunch with?
Well, jealousy is definitely part of it.
I mean,
I don't know, maybe, but at the time, you know, I was a lot younger, and I was just like, and you know, people were saying, senior people were saying, keep your head down. But Nick was always the one that I kind of listened to, because he was my big boss. Yeah, and you know, he found it funny, but I think you've got
to, I think if you can you've got to find a space to laugh about, haven't you?
Actually, well, now I can easily laugh about
it. But it was, you know, it's probably what made Claude, like I say, like unique, like actually who has the power of doing. I would have thought, actually, weren't people offended if they weren't in your week? Like,
I didn't even think about it that way.
Okay, well, why didn't I feature in your? I think you should just think about more the people you left out, and you were just trying to get.
That's right.
You were trying to get as many people in as you could.
That's why I love you.
But but there is a bigger thing where. And it happens all the time, and maybe social media is the new version of it, but there is always, when you're out there doing stuff, whether it's going to lunches, dinners, events, whatever, whether you go to Cannes, whether you go to all these things, there's a whole community of people that are like, when do you do your day job?
Yeah, that's right.
When
in fact, those were some of the comments.
Yeah.
Well, that's why, because you did it 16 hours. 17 hours a day.
Right. And that's someone else wrote that. Like, that's because she is in the office at 7 and works till however, like goes out in the evenings and comes home at midnight. And that is true. But people were like, I feel sorry for all the people that are working for her that have to do the work.
But in today's world, it's like, as you all know, I've been, you know, LinkedIn and Twitter, when Twitter was something you wanted to be part of. You know, loads of that. And the amount of people that would say, well, how do you fit your day job in?
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, you clearly don't use it or know.
Yeah.
It's instinctive if you just do use things a lot. And,
exactly.
And to be honest, the network that created, your network, it helps you in so many different ways at different times. You don't know when it's most good.
No, absolutely.
When you launch a business, it helps you. When you know, maybe if you've lost your job, it helps you. It's a really important part, but it's all about relationships. Going back to your client conversation,
it's about you, as you say. If your client had an issue that needed to get sorted, you knew that you could pick the phone up to the CEO at the Telegraph.
But I think
and that is all based on that is actually what clients are. That's why they do want you to be so well connected.
And that has happened so many times where I have managed to phone up either the editor of The Sun or the, you know, at the time the CEO of the Telegraph and ask them to help me with something, and they do.
And that's relationships. Yeah, it's because they actually respect.
But again,
you.
it is lessons for like if anyone, you know, asks me for advice, I'm like, the bottom line is we're still a people industry.
Yeah.
And the more connections you make, the more relationships you have, the better off you'll be. And anyone who tells you, like, oh God, you know, how can you be doing your day? It's just undermining. We were talking about it earlier, where I had a boss when I started in Viviki, and up until then, everyone who, if you went to a conference, everyone would go, oh fucking, is it another like jolly or whatever, and you know, you get slagged off for it. And then I had a boss who went in the US. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, and he came along like and he's like, go to every event, get to Cannes,
Yep.
go to the, the Google used to do those tours around all the companies or whoever. Yeah. Well, Zeitgeist, things like that. And he'd be like, no one wants to, no, if you're chief digital officer, no client wants to hear that the information you giving them has come from like the Facebook rep of, man. They want to know you've just walked out of Apple's HQ last week, or you were in Cannes and you heard from the founder of whatever. And it's very liberating when someone gives you that permission. Yeah. And I think like my advice to people is get out there.
Yeah. Just do get out there. Before, we are going to be running out of time soon, but we definitely want to ask you your magpie moment. Is there something that you've seen someone else do, or a phrase, or just something that you thought, oh, that's a really good idea? I want to, we call it steal with pride. Have you got anything that you could pass on? Because then somebody else can pick it up from this podcast.
I think there have been so many, but something that really sticks with me, and I do think it's more of a female thing, if I'm honest, is that when I got promoted from head of investment to managing director, I think I was the first managing director in the industry that didn't have a planning background, because I was all buying. And I remember thinking, my goodness, I'm the managing director of this massive company and everyone's kind of looking up to me. And so I have to learn everything. So I threw myself into planning and asking the chief strategy director if he would sit with me and take me through it, and the digital guys and all the rest of it. Anyway, roll on 3 months. And Nick, again, who was my boss, had taken me out and he said to me, how are you enjoying your job? And I said, I absolutely hate it. And he went, of course you do. And I said, why? He said, because you're doing it all wrong. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Claude, you're not a planner. He said, and you're not a digital person. We promoted you to be managing director because people internally find you really inspirational. You're very approachable, and clients love you, which is the main thing. So I'm not interested in you learning all of that. You know the basics of it. Of course you do. He said, you think you're worse than you are. You're not at all. He said, and if someone wants to get into a very technical digital conversation with you, you just say, I know the person that could. He said, you haven't been out to see any clients because you're literally so focused on this. You need to concentrate on what you're good at.
That's your superpower.
And yes. And that's what I did. And that's what I tell people. And the thing is, if you work for the right company, right, one thing I will always say about MediaCom through the years, and I would say kind of the group agencies, I've seen it at Wavemaker and at Mindshare, is that everyone is aware that people have strengths and people have weaknesses. And where people have weaknesses, there are other people that will come and help them. And there was another media organisation, I'll say, that the CEO once said to me, oh, your organisation, my organisation are so similar. I said, no, they're not. They're absolutely completely different. I said, the difference is, I said, the thing that's the same is we're both the biggest in our kind of group, if you like. I said, the difference is that everyone at your place literally gets the knife out if they see a shred of weakness. Whereas at our place, people put their arms around each other and say, how can I help you? And that's why I would say concentrate on your strengths, because that is your superpower.
No, definitely. And we've talked again about diversity. Like, if we're all the same, what's the point?
Yeah.
You want diverse teams with diverse thoughts. And everybody has their own superpower. Of course, we talk about T-shaped people. You've got your superpower and you have a level of understanding of business understanding. But actually what people really love out of you is your superpower is clients.
Yeah.
And as you say, you were then pulled away from that because you're trying to do everything else.
So,
it's a learn.
I think that's it. I think that's, for people going into those leadership roles, there is that moment, especially when you might be competing against other people, and then you get the job, and then suddenly there's always that moment, as you say, where they're all looking at you. And the people who aren't, if there are people that aren't being particularly friendly about it, they're a bit like, okay, so you got it. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What's the plan? What's the plan? Yeah. And I always say to people like, no, you ask them what the plan is.
Yeah.
Right. What are you going to do? And and take a moment to sort of go, right, I'm going to think things through. I'm going to work out, as you say, what am I good at and what do I need?
Yeah.
Who are the right people to bring to my team to sort of make us whole?
Yeah.
And you can be a huge
absolutely.
success. That leadership isn't about knowing everything or doing everything.
No.
And also having the confidence that you don't have to be. I think that's showing also a strength in leadership, because you want the team around them to be able to thrive, to be honest.
Yeah.
And if somebody's in a corner thinking, I can't do that, then they're going to spend so much time obsessing about what they can't do and then not do the brilliance has. So I think it's a really important leadership trait. And then finally, because we do like to finish, if we can, on almost like that final piece of advice, that it could be professional, it could be personal, like from personally. Like, is there anything that you've been given? And actually, did you listen to it? Did you listen? Like, if you're given the advice, I mean, you can be given advice, you don't have to listen to it.
I think in some instances I've listened to it, and in some I haven't. So I think, when people say, just do things that you're scared of doing, because actually you learn a lot from it. So I was talking to someone today that's on a panel at Adweek, and I said, oh, good luck at Adweek. And she said, oh, I'm absolutely dreading it. I said, we always dread doing these things, and then afterwards we're really happy that we did them. When people say do things that are scary, have I done things? I mean, I have done things that are scary. Maybe people would think to themselves, I'm sure they would, that being at somewhere for 30 years hasn't really pushed yourself into like scary territory. But I would say push yourself. And also, I'm going to finish on this story actually, because it's a really interesting story. So when I was at my very first agency, we were buying press, right? That's what we did. And there was a guy that worked there. He worked with me. We were really junior. We'd only had, 6 months to a year's experience. And he came in one day and he said, oh, I'm leaving. I said, where are you going? He said, well, I'm going to MediaVest to do TV. And I said, but you don't know anything about TV. And he went, I know, but I'll work it out. I said, no. Hold on. What do you mean you'll work it out? When they give you a plan, just explain this to me. They give you a plan and say, buy this.
Yeah.
What are you going to actually do? And he went, oh, I'll call Nigel, who was our TV buyer. I said, well, you can't. You're at a competitive agency. He said, I'll work it out. Now, there is no way I would ever, even now probably, have gone for a TV job thinking I've got no experience. He ended up as the TV director of MediaVest and has gone on to do like really well. And so I always say, as a few people say, I'll do it and I'll work it out. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, they do work it out. They do.
That is
and
funny.
if you have a good network and you have people around you and you make the time to give as much as you give more actually than you take, people will help you. So that's what I would say.
And those are that sentiment of our work it out is, I also think, because I've been asked this before when someone's about to get a job and they're worrying about and I'm like, they chose you.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Don't
they want you.
Don't worry about. Don't worry about something that
that's
you
right.
haven't. They're not worrying about it because they're hiring you.
That's right.
So there's a bit of like you just have to remind yourself you've been chosen for a reason. Like,
that's absolutely
worry
right.
about it later.
Or if in doubt, phone Nigel.
That's right. Phone Nigel.
Oh, you're not.
Phone a friend.
Can I tell you
phone a friend?
Yeah.
Nigel lives on a yacht off Monaco now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to call Nigel.
Nigel lives on a yacht.
Amazing. Oh, Claude, that was just fantastic.
Oh,
amazing.
I'm so honoured to be
you.
asked to do this.
No,
Thank you
we're
so much.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So, Margaret, I think we're in to final advice. Final advice
Have you got a gem for us?
I've got a gem, and it's trying to loop in with what Claude talked about. This is, again, from the book, If I Could Tell You Just One Thing. And this is from Ruthie Rogers, who is the co-founder of River Cafe. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's incredibly...
Do you know what? I lived about 5 minutes from it, never made it because I couldn't afford it in those days.
Well, I've got to say, you definitely can't afford it these days then. But it is beautiful there by the river. And also, she's a cookbook writer. But what I liked about it when when Richard Reed met Ruthie. He says here, in her majestic Chelsea home, designed by architect husband Richard Rogers. So they're really not achieving in life, this couple, are they? They're not really, they're obviously doing something wrong. But this is what her advice is. And she says, people often talk to me about how much they love the food, but they always start by saying how good the people were. And this is her advice. Give and you get back what you give. Treat everyone as individuals. Understand how people are and encourage them. There is a real discipline too, underpinning the work they do. I strongly believe that you achieve more in a work environment with hope rather than fear. The whole concept of people shouting or bullying or intimidating is foreign to me. And I think that fits in really nicely with what Claudine was saying about actually how she fosters her relationships. She understands people as individuals, but also that they try to have a culture of
Put their arm around each other.
Yeah, hope and rather than
Stabbing
fear.
each other.
So I think that kind of blends nicely.
Thanks, Rach.
Yeah.
So that's all we've got time for, I think. Isn't it?
No. I
Yeah,
think it
another
is.
episode down. So don't forget, we love to hear about your mentors and any advice you might have received. Send it in to hello@mentorpodcastofficial.com. I'm still getting the hang of that email.
Mentor is a Viral Tribe entertainment production.
Don't forget to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.